Loved this conversation with Nu.
Yeah. Nu is a person that you're about to get on a boat, maybe a rocky boat, and you're about to go on a rocky speedboat, and you'll get why we're talking about that if you listen to the episode. And we are going to go on a journey of how to think about your career, how to think about thinking, how to approach keynote speaking and life, and so many topics.
How to open up the aperture from here to really here and all the things. I thought so many of his lessons talk about vulnerability, that sitting in discomfort is kind of the biggest superpower there is. Love his very real, very tangible shares and lessons to, life, and then also very specifically in his career and keynotes and kind of all of the things that he does.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom here if you're somebody who is kind of embarking on maybe something that people don't always understand from the outside, which we related to, where you might have an unconventional career now, and how you kind of weave that story and what lessons in your upbringing and your life that you can bring into that, and what you need to kind of do to think about it differently. It was a fun one.
It was really fun. If you liked it, share it with somebody, give the algorithm some love, and we'd love to hear what you think. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in Good Co, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
Okay, so excited for this chat, for this podcast. Welcome to Good Thinking.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. I have a question. What do you quantify or qualify as good thinking? What makes the thinking good?
Well, gosh, maybe the audience can drop that in the chat and inform us about what makes things good.
Yeah.
It's funny. I say we, but it was really me. I named the Substack like the day before I sent out the first one. Like it was not like, it was like, okay, what are we thinking about here? And our company name is In Good Co, like In Good Company. And so it's just literally like you're getting the thinking from In Good Company. Like that was all I was like, okay. So that was it. But it's turned out that a lot of people think that there's some good thinking in there. So that works out. It's aptly named.
When you mentioned me, and so when we met at Paradigm, right?
Yes, we met at Paradigm.
Yeah, we've got a little. Give a little background.
You gotta introduce yourself.
We
gotta introduce yourself.
Have to introduce you. We haven't met.
Sorry.
Nu, who are you? Tell us.
In this current moment, I am a designer, a researcher, a strategist, a studio owner, an artist, and a person with student loans.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Many people can relate to that.
So
at least the last part.
Yes. So you guys met at the Paradigm conference that I was not able to go to, and I've heard amazing things ever since. And you and I have still not yet met. This is our first encounter, which I'm beyond excited about.
Yeah.
So while we were in Paradigm in Marrakesh, Nu flew in, somehow was like, didn't go to bed. I mean, maybe the entire time that we were at Paradigm, possibly, and yet managed to give one of the most inspiring, soulful talks of the entire thing. And I came back from Paradigm and I wrote about it, and I'll link to that little recap in the show notes. But I can't even summarize what you said, Nu, because it was too many things said. But I feel like the way you deliver information is just such a soulful, like just really raw, vulnerable, emotional, optimistic view of the world. And I was like, Kirsten's gonna love this guy. Like that was my entire takeaway from like the whole time I was just sitting there. I was like, she's gonna love him. And then finally a year later we have you on the podcast. And all I wanted to do was introduce the world to you, because I was like, this guy's amazing. So yeah, here we are.
Well, go ahead. Do you want to?
No, I mean, I said it all. Like
I can hop in. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, when we met, so we're in Morocco. I was booked for Paradigm, and then I happen upon Chris, and we're just sitting there and we're just talking casually, and then we start talking about
Substack.
Substacks, about
Of course you did.
thinking in public, and what does that mean? And I remember, and it's interesting because whenever I'm doing talks, especially if I'm not going early, and now most of the times I'm doing keynotes, so I'm going later, people want to ask me, like, what are you talking about most of the time? And I have to play this like cat and mouse game where I can be like, I can give you a little bit, but I kind of don't want to like reveal the whole thing because I like the performance aspect of it.
Yep.
And so, yeah. And so I think in that, I do want to thank y'all because when you mentioned me in the newsletter, I got hit up by so many people being like, oh my God, you've
Awesome.
made it. And I was like, wow.
I love it. Love it.
It's like, wow.
You're in the big leagues now.
Love this.
It wasn't the
Yes.
keynote. It wasn't the keynote invites. It was really the appearance in good thinking.
Wait,
Yeah.
I want to understand something here, Nu. I want to understand. So people are asking you what you are talking about, and you're being a little bit coy about that. Are you doing that based on the performance? And if so, I want to understand more about what the performance is. But is it also that your talk is it completely baked, or do you kind of leave some room to change it up?
I leave it's both. It's both. My philosophy is that the first person I want to satisfy and make the talk enjoyable for is me. Because at least if I enjoy it, then there's one person who I knew enjoyed it. I cannot control how everybody else is going to receive the talk. I can only control how I'm going to receive it. And so part of it is a stand-up bit academic lecture where I'm like, okay, there's something that I think is provocative and interesting. And how can I set this up like a punchline that allows for people to enter into this thought that I can talk you through and use myself as a vehicle to get there. And then there's a payoff on the other side of that. And so all of that is hard to explain to somebody when they're like, okay, so what are you going to talk about? And I'm like, well,
I've
I'm
seen
going
you
to talk
speak.
about design.
Yeah, I've seen you speak.
Yeah.
I have no idea what we're talking about. No, I mean, but I think it would be helpful. No, seriously though, like I think one of the things that's really interesting about you is that you've created this, you have a studio, right? You work mostly in kind of like a realm of like architecture, graphic design, intersection of community. Like you do a lot of different things in your day-to-day practice as like a studio, right? But you've really kind of created a keynote career, I'd say, like especially in the last year, from what I can tell from LinkedIn. And I thought that would be interesting to kind of get into because I think a lot of people, we have a lot of like C-suite level people who either are booking people or who are themselves kind of entering this like, how do I become a keynote speaker? How do I approach it? And it's quite hard, I found, as somebody who's also entering into this, of figuring out like, what's your vibe? How do you approach it? How do you be unique? How do you be differentiated? Like we do our talks together and that helps because it's like the duo is the dynamic duo is different. But it's how have you kind of built this world for yourself when your talks are unconventional and different?
Yeah, I think, and to just give the listeners, the readers, the viewers, the studio audience a bit more context. So my studio is called Room for Magic. And the studio practice, it does sit between research, strategy, and branding, which allows for us to work with architecture studios and placemaking to do community engaged research to understand what people want. And so we call that more the meaning making, more the existential part of our work. And then there's the form making, which is like, how do we translate the actual meaning and the crux of why we exist into a form that will get people excited? And that also comes from my background of working at brands for over 15 years, whether Puma, Red Bull, Sonos. Like I was really good and still good at making things cool and desirable. And so what you end up seeing is me combining both of those things together into one form of like, how do we make socially impactful things that support a better future for all of us cool and interesting? And so in that, like part of my approach with the keynote is how do I pull from different nodes of culture, of comedy, of social commentary, of like progressive theoretical thinking and bring that together. And so I didn't intend to have a career in keynote speaking. It wasn't something I was like seeking out to. It became a necessity. And it became a necessity because in addition to the Studio Room for Magic, we also published a journal called Deem Journal, in which
Beautiful.
Thank you. Deem looks at design through the lens of socially engaged art as a way to reorient design to not only be about aesthetic and form, but to be more about dignity and inviting more perspectives within that. And so when you start a business, spoiler alert, like the reward for hard work is more work because people were like, wait a minute, what's the thing? And I was like, well, man, I got to kind of explain the thing now. How do I explain this thing so people can understand it? And so in having to try to explain something that's super nuanced in an engaging way that doesn't flatten it completely, like that was how I started forming my voice to be able to speak publicly. And so in that, it was COVID. It was like right after George Floyd, and a really good friend of ours, a woman named Lin Yi, who started Mold magazine, was doing a talk for Space 10. Space 10 used to be a research institution that that IKEA was supporting. And Lin Yi was like, hey, I have this slot with Space 10 to do a virtual talk, but she's like, I think I would love Deem and Deem's voice to be part of this talk. Would you want to do this with me? And we were like, sure. And it was in that talk, I was like, oh yeah, design upholds systems of white supremacy and patriarchy. And somebody there was like, man, this guy has it. And I was like, okay. And so that was the first time I spoke publicly like that. And then from there, it just came out of necessity of figuring out like, how can I start to not only communicate the philosophy of the studio that supports the work, but also start to bring other people into a conversation that isn't just about selling people things.
Right. And I mean, you talked a lot about that in your talk of like not just selling people things. And so what is like, can you give people an example of like the last talk that you gave, like in summary, or is that just impressive?
Yeah. So the last talk that I gave was at the 99U conference. I was a keynote at the 99U. That happened, I don't know when this is coming out, but that happened last week. And in that talk, what was interesting was I had a 20-minute like window, right? A 20-minute window to fit an hour and a lifetime worth of content. And so I will give you the framework of how my talk works. It starts off, actually, what I've been doing, it starts off with a cold open, meaning I drop you into an exciting moment. The exciting moment that I drop people into in this talk was I won the Cooper Hewitt National Design Award last year for Emerging Designer. And what that has brought up was that people want to define my work. And so they asked me, what kind of designer are you? And then my hesitancy to indulge in that. And so I had this picture of me on this grand staircase with all these illustrious designers and then me there. And then I had this little bubble that's like, hey, Nu, what kind of design do you do? And it's like a comic book thing. And then me being like, I don't really know. I'm trying to figure that out. And then that brings you in to the talk. And part of that was like opening up with vulnerability. And that's one of the most important things for me is that my talks are never like, I am the authority telling you what you should know and understand. It's much more like, hey, I am a curious, charismatic person who's willing to learn in public. Come along with me as I am thinking through this thing. And here are the things that I've learned, and hopefully there's some things that can resonate with you as well. People tend to like that because we all have insecurities, and I'm not coming up there like I have it all figured out. But then I go into my early understanding. So the whole talk was what do you mean by design is the title of it. Like, what do we call this thing? How do we sit with things that we think we understand and nuance them and trouble them a bit that we can come out of it with new understanding? And so the initial part is Nu growing up and understanding what design is as somebody who got a bootleg version of Photoshop and hacked it to do whatever, then me departing from design and moving towards marketing and learning storytelling as a brand marketer, and then me going back into design because I wanted to solve problems. And then there's this moment that I have a big full bleed image of Trayvon Martin when he's at space camp looking just angelic and glorious. And part of that is to situate the time in my life where I was just like, you know what? Selling things is cool, but you know what else is really cool? Actually having an impact and influencing how people start to consider themselves in the world. And that ends up being the turn in like the presentation where it's just like, okay, we talked about like the fun stuff, and now let me show you how I got to where I'm at now. And then that allows for me to show some case study work. And the case study work, I'm revealing all the secrets here, but the case study work, to be honest, it's more me just saying, hey, designers who make beautiful things, we can make the beautiful thing. We do the beautiful things. Here you go. Here's a beautiful thing. Here's a beautiful thing. Here's this beautiful thing. Okay, now that we all understand and we all know that we're capable of making the beautiful thing, let's park that. And now let's talk about the existential thing and then start diving into what are some of the issues that I start to see when we think about design in a flat way. And the way how I frame that up is what is design? And so now where I'm at is how do we departure from what design is to looking at what design can function as? And this framing from is to as this opening of the aperture that allows many more thoughts, many more opportunities for many more people to participate and find themselves within design, and then ending with like a takeaway. And so there's always frameworks that I sit with, my studio sits with, to be like, here's my offering to you. And that ends up concluding my TED Talk that I haven't got yet. But
Love
day.
it. Love it.
Yeah, but Kirsten, go ahead. I feel like you have a lot of questions.
I mean, I do have a lot of questions. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I love kind of the way that you think about it. And I think it's so just like the idea of the aperture and you know, we try to, I think as human beings, like categorize things and like, well, what type of designer? Because if I can like categorize you in something, then somehow that makes me feel like safer. I don't fucking know why, but somehow that makes me feel safer to be able to categorize you as that. And it makes me understand it versus just being like, wow, can do all of these things. And I think it's so apropos. The aperture is just a really good example for so many things in life. Like right now we were just talking to somebody as far as careers, like you're not just this one thing. And we talk a lot about this, like, you know, not just being one thing and not just being kind of a very narrow version of that, but being many different things. And maybe they contrast and that's okay. But what I really want to know is where did this come from? Like, where did this thinking, where did this desire to share vulnerability, like the idea even that you said early on as far as, you know, the most important thing of the audience of the talk is that you feel good about it. Like, where did that kind of confidence and focus and comfort and vulnerability come from?
this question has come up a lot. Like somebody DM'd me about it yesterday. A childhood best friend was like, when did you become this person? Like, because I hadn't spoken to him in a while. And I think the honest truth is that my family, so I was born in Liberia. I came to the United States at the age of 3 as a refugee. I am part of a tribe called the Pele tribe, and storytelling and the auditory approach to conveying messaging is just something that's embedded in just how my parents talk. And so in that, it shows up not in the most affirming way as somebody who now is a parent. Like I used to categorize as like, why would my mom or my dad exaggerate something, right? So let's say you're supposed to be home by 10 o'clock, you get home at 11. Oh my God. The conversation then is like, oh, you're out in the streets gallivanting, doing all these things. What are you doing? And then it just like a whole world gets built, right? Around you. This indictment gets built around you. And you're like, what? Where is this coming from? And so in that, what I started to realize, because I'm representing Liberia for a Pan-African biennial that's coming up. So I'm doing an art piece that is about communication and narratives. And what I started to realize was that in terms of especially the Pele tribe, like the way how stories are narrated, there is this ability to contract and expand a story based off of what's the emotion you want to convey, not based off how literal it has to be. The literalness of it is the foundation, but what you really want is to land the emotion of it. And so in that, to be able to expand the world and contract the world in the story is what my parents were demonstrating against me. It wasn't working in my favor. But I think with that, those things are embedded in how I think about communicating things and how I tell stories. But I would say a more literal one was when I finished grad school, so worked in marketing for 15 years, went to grad school for design thinking, and then went and worked at an ad agency that was interested in service design. And I sucked at it. I almost got fired in the first 3 months because I came from being the client. I was the client forever. And then I was in this super theoretical program at Parsons called Strategic Design and Management. Super theoretical. And now I'm like in the belly of the beast and I'm sitting there and like nobody told me what a strategist is supposed to do. I'm just like, okay, cool. I'm here as a strategist. They put me on a couple of pitches and I bombed. I bombed. And there was a moment where my manager, great guy, Josh, was like, let's have lunch with the big boss, said, and like try to just like clear the air. It was a coming to Jesus, like, you're about to get fired, bro. Like, let's just have a moment so that doesn't catch you off guard. And so in the lunch, I'm sitting there and, Seb is going in and he's like giving me his honest critique. And he like said something. He's like, you don't even know what an insight is. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, you don't even know what an insight is. And I was like, okay, well then, so what's an insight? And nobody could answer me. And I was like, so wait a minute, if my job is to know what an insight is and nobody could really give me a clear answer, I was like, okay, awesome, cool. This lunch is over. Thank you. You gave me the cheat code. So I went and I started doing research on what an insight is. It's a hidden human truth that opens up possibilities, but not until you combine the right information. And then in digging in that, I saw like, oh, you know who does insights really well? Comedians. I was like, oh, when Jerry Seinfeld's like, "Oh, you know what's interesting about muffin tops?" I was like, oh, yeah, that's an insight because I wasn't thinking about
True.
muffin tops until you said that. And so then I went down this rabbit hole of just like really studying like comedy and observational comedy and specifically stand up. And so in that, when I say I like bring stand up into my approach, it's more just like, how do you take a hidden human truth and merge that into something that you can convey to people?
I love that. I think stand-up comedy is so rad, and the structure and the framing of it, which I'm recently learned about. That's so, I love that. That brings up something that might be a bit of a side topic and maybe something because we need to figure out. But yeah, odd, isn't it? But that's the fucking truth. Is like we are all like I was in a bit of corporate for a while in my career. And you are in this position, whether it's brand manager, creative director, art director, brand strategist, whatever it is. And no one's like, oh, here's the thing. Here's what you're supposed to be doing. Like, here's your role. And it's like, it could be any role, just, change out a few words. But it's not like, here's actually what an art director does. Like, look at this photo shoot. You pull together nobody's doing that. You're just in this position. And then because you're in corporate, I think that, and because we live in the society we do, there's like a framing of like, well, of course I know what to do. Like, of course I know what this is, and it's like, that's total bullshit. So I think we need to get, to the basics of like explaining what it is.
Yeah, or not. Like, I actually think the entire thing that, that makes us good at what we're doing, and maybe I'm gathering maybe makes Nu good at what he's doing, is that he wasn't trained by the belly of the beast, and he wasn't kind of like broken down and it's like, this is an insight. Like, I can't tell you how many strategists we've worked with who are like, here's your framework. And it's like, these 4 boxes, and they just like sit there and they're like, monkey it in. And it's like, like you filled it in for the same company. Like, and it's just like, that's what you're paying people for? Like, that's what you want? Like, that's not a good idea. And I think what resonates about the newsletter and, about what you're doing is that we aren't that. And so then we just say how it is. Like, it's just like, okay, like this is what it is. And it's much less contrived, and it's not trying to just like tick a box, right? Like it's trying to actually create something and design, like open the aperture like what design is. And you've spoken like at the talk, and it's coming back to me in waves now. It's like, okay, I might have had a few beers while I was at Paradigm, so
I
that
know. I was
might have
like,
been there,
is
like
there a hallucinogenic
like,
that I need to know about?
but like when something is like a long time ago, and then you were like, and then it's like, oh yeah, like as he's mentioning things, I'm like, I remember that part of his talk. And you talked a lot about like kind of designing designing communities and designing wayfinding, and like it's just that there's so many things that we could be designing that so many people again just kind of take for granted, and they just do it because it's like been always done that way. And I think that one of the things that's really interesting is that you don't really approach anything that way. Like, and I think that may be why I resonate with you. Like,
and I will admit it does. It's not the best biz dev approach. It's not.
no,
It's not. It's not.
we know.
Speaking our language.
Right? It's not. It's not. It's but because somebody said to me recently, I was like at a friend's house, and people say to me all the time, they're like, "Do y'all do event production?" And I'm like, "No, we don't." And they're like, "Man, do you know how much money you can make?" I was like, "Yeah, I do know how much money we can make," but I was like, "But the issue is that ends up requiring a specific amount of investment in terms of overhead, in terms of expertise and all those things that I was like, that ends up taking away from the thinking and the communication work that I am excited about. And yeah, we can do that to like check some boxes, but I'm like, I believe that this space that we all sit in that's a bit ambiguous right now is continuing to increase in value, and that I don't want to abandon this ship for something that's a bit more sturdy and certain, that is like that's putting along, like that's cool. But I was like, I don't know, there's like a really wobbly speedboat over there that I find to be more alluring.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen.
And
wobbly
guess
speedboat any
yeah.
day.
Yeah. And that was what, like, so one of my questions on here was like, how you kind of, like, what advice do you have for people kind of, I think a lot of people that I meet regularly are like, should I go out on my own? Should I start an agency? And I think that there's a kind of very like maybe too soon questions. Like, it's like, what do you want to, like, how do you want to be operating? What do you want to be doing? Like when I talk to my therapist about it, she's like, what do you want like it to feel like when you're like, when you're successful, like, what does it feel like? And I'm like, oh, right. And I think you maybe approach life somewhat similarly. Like, what do you think is the best advice right now for people who are kind of navigating this very, like, it's ambiguous is the right word. Like, people are scared. People don't know. The jobs that were secure are suddenly wobbly boats. And then it's like, you're on a wobbly boat. And suddenly, like, that seems like a great ship to be on. Like, how do you give advice in this world?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that I think about. One of them is just the very, very real reality of things is that you can be on a wobbly boat, but where can you find security, right? Meaning, if you have a day job, don't lose the day job. Can you parallel path it? And I would say, even for me to create Room for Magic and Dean, there was a time where I still had that job. Like, I was still at a job, and it just meant that I was coming in early, I was staying later, I was using the phone booth to take calls that weren't pertaining to the day job. But I had that security that gave me more of the freedom to continue to build the muscle and the capacity. Then the other thing that a lot of people don't talk about, and I want to give a shout out to my wife. My wife has an amazing job, and the job is sturdy, and it pays her well enough for me to continue to take risks and to take chances. And so in that, I always want to dispel the myth of like the singular person who's just doing it all. It's like, no, either there's some funding coming from a parent, an aunt, or whatever, or there's a significant other. Like, there's always somebody else in the mix that is giving you the space to afford that. And I think for me, especially, the affordance is like, okay, we're in a dual income household. We also have 2 kids. I also travel a lot. So being able to have a system with somebody who I can trust and somebody who trusts me, especially when I'm like, man, this shit is hard. Should I take a job? And she's like, no, you would hate that. And I was like, okay, boo. Okay, breadwinner boo. I'm going to listen to you. and keep doing the thing. And so I think like there's like that part of it, right? That's like very real. And I don't want to lie to anybody to just be like, jump off the bridge and just like you'll get
Yeah,
taught by
but
the
that's
wind. Like, no.
important. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
it
that's
is.
Yeah.
important.
And,
I mean,
and then,
and not just financially too. Like my
yes.
husband, like everyone's like, yeah, you're everywhere, and it's like, yeah, I
Mm.
also have a really like amazing husband who like takes my child, and Kirsten is divorced, and she has her kids every 2 weeks. So like that makes that
Yes.
possible in some ways, and some ways that makes it more difficult. But it's like, but it's I think that everybody looks at these things and thinks that it's very easy or like that you have some sort of special system. And it's like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
But I think
But there are some
sharing,
people helping.
yeah, taking the time to think about and share those things along your journey, because most people are just, oh, I just want to tell you the good things and the glorious things and the good Instagram photos and all of the things. I think it's really meaningful and really important to take the time to be able to do those for others, for people that are listening, for people that are coming up, to be like, yeah, it's not all fucking pretty. It's not all perfect. There are
No.
sacrifices that somebody's making along the way to be able to make this possible. And that's just real.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other part of it is that I personally have what I'll consider a higher than normal ability to sit within discomfort. Right. And that is like the key to it. It's like, can you sit within ambiguity and discomfort and the unknown? And how long can you do that? Like, and so part of it is like, yeah, I have payroll that I need to hit every single month. I have clients that we're negotiating contracts that when I get the contract back, I was like, wait, does this person really want us to work on? Do they hate us? Okay, maybe they don't hate us. Like what is this? Like, then there's like pitches that we're pitching against the biggest studio of like a zillion people. And I'm like, okay, like, can we do this? But I think in that though, my illusion of grandeur, my naivete, and then also the reality of we didn't come this far to come this far. There's been so many other places that I've been in challenges. I've almost got fired from 2 jobs, and I've been able to get around that I'm like, "Oh, if I just stay the course, like things will continue happening." And so what I've been telling people a lot lately is that nobody's coming to save us, right? We see it. Nobody is coming to save us. Like that's just the reality of it. So it means that you need to step forward, but the universe is conspiring on our side. So if you're able to step forward and initiate, the universe will meet you in that. But that's also part of like being able to say, okay, today sucked. There's days where I'll get one email in the morning and it will just like stay in my head. Like it will just stay in my head. And I have to remind myself, like, oh, this time last year, I didn't have that problem. This is a new problem. This is good because I have new problems that I have to solve.
Yes, this is, as Chris
I
knows,
told you,
my
I was
favorite,
like, this is like,
my favorite conversation to have in the world, because for many reasons, being able to sit in discomfort is the biggest fucking superpower there is, period. And it does so many things as you kind of talked about. But where does that come from for you? Because it's not like none of us, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is where it comes from for you. Most of us in this society did not learn to do that as parents. Like you can now see it. Like most people are like, don't cry, don't do that. Like soothe it, figure out how to stop the thing that's happening because it's making me uncomfortable. We didn't lean into that. Like for me, I know that I had to discover that. I had discovered that in a really hard, like, my world collapsing and kind of being built back up. But how did you come to find that?
I think a couple of things. One, once again, my parents and my household. So there was the reason why I came to the United States as a refugee was that there was a civil war in Liberia. And so that had a very visceral effect on how my parents process the world. And so in that, specifically my dad, and this is something that comes out in me sometimes, and I need to be like, oh shit, put it back in the bottle, is African dads are optimized for discipline. They're not optimized for love. They're not optimized for coddling. It is like discipline and structure because of the environment that especially my parents grew up in. And so in that also meant like my household was ran in a way where it was like, oh no, you do the thing is going to be done. You wake up at 6, kids should not sleep past 7 a.m. on a weekend. Like all these things, I was like, man, my dad is tripping. Like y'all are tripping. And they were, rightfully so, they were tripping. But also what that ended up translating to me was this like work ethic that had gotten me to the point that I was like, oh, if I invest and do this thing, I can achieve this thing. Okay, if I'm able to achieve that thing and that thing's really hard, I wonder if I can achieve this thing. And then I ended up combining, I guess, that with my understanding of like, if you have an idea, creativity is just bringing that idea to life so other people can experience it. And then I fell in love with the notion of like, I can have this random thought and make something exist. And the thing that's going to exist is going to be hard to do, but fuck it, it's worth it to create that thing. Then I don't know, I just became a masochist for it, I guess, where I don't shy away from the hard things. I'm like, oh no, on the other side of that is going to be something so alluring and so like enticing.
Right. So that makes sense in that leaning into the, and I personally identify with that so much, leaning into like doing the hard thing and accomplishing that and then moving on to the next thing without even like realizing you did the thing and patting yourself on the back or others and moving on to the next thing. But I think that's different. It's probably along the same lines than being able to sit in the thing, because discomfort is like not just doing the hard thing. It's kind of sitting in it and not being able to do anything, which I think for people like you or I that kind of do the thing is really fucking hard.
So I have a monthly spa practice that involves hallucinogens.
Tell me more.
I wrote this thing.
Once a month, I go to Beverly Hot Springs and I do a hero dose of shrooms and I sit in the hot tub. Right. I sit in the hot tub and I just like think, and I'm able to just like think about shit and connect dots. And I'm like, awesome. And then one day I heard some dude doing some breath exercises in the cold plunge. And I'm like, cold plunge? No way. I'm in the hot tub. I'm enjoying comfort. And then the shrooms were like, no, you're next. Like, get into the cold plunge. And so that was like my first initiation into like physical discomfort. But then I got to the point where I was like, I wonder if I can do this for 3 minutes. And so I will get into a cold plunge, submerge myself to the neck. And in that, the entire time, what I'm thinking about is that this discomfort does not equal death. This will not kill me, right? And then I evolved to say, oh, well, what if I can find enjoyment in this discomfort? What if I like loosen my shoulders a bit? What if I actually start to sink into this? And what if, because usually I count to 63 times. And I was like, what if I stop counting and my goal is to trick myself to enjoy being in the cold plunge more than I want to be in the hot tub? And what I started to do was just start to, I guess you can call it meditation, you can call it, I was tripping on shrooms, but, and this isn't once time, this is like me doing this over like a year and a half.
It's intentional.
Yeah, intentional. But I got to the point that I was like, in our minds, anything, and we inherited this from our fight or flight, being a hunter or gatherer. When you would see danger, your testosterone would go up because you can potentially die. And that has translated into a flinching mechanism. So if I did this to you, you're like, oh. And so in the world that we live, a couple of people have found ways around the flinching mechanism. Boxers and mixed martial artists, right? Because if you take a punch in the face, which most people do not want to take a punch in the face, your initial reaction is to pull back. But if you pull back, you're on the defense. And in that, you're going to get pummeled. So boxers have to train themselves to step into a punch and continue moving on offense. And so in that, this is me, high shrooms, thinking about all this, right? I'm like, okay, so then what does that mean in an everyday setting? And how can I disconnect this idea from discomfort and death? Because being uncomfortable now doesn't mean I'm going to die. It just means that either I am concerned about being judged, perceived, I'm insecure, all these things. And so in that, I do have a practice of when I'm in the shit, when I'm like, this is uncomfortable, I try to like take a moment to go back to either it's the hot tub or thinking about boxing and being like, how do I extract myself from this moment, knowing that this moment is only momentary, that it's not going to define me, and that I need to get beyond this.
Amazing. I love this. I have no further questions. I just need to know where to be at Beverly Springs next month. Let me know the details.
You know,
Don't reveal your sources. Don't reveal your sources.
All right, Chris, your witness.
It was like, we're watching and it's like, and then it's like, you're like, and then there's shrooms, and Kirsten's eyes are like, oh my gosh.
I mean,
I'm here for this.
I got to the answer.
Yes. I mean, I did tell you. I mean, I didn't even know he was doing shrooms in a hot tub, and it's like, I can just tell.
Yes, you can.
This is my ability. It's one of my superpowers. One of my six senses.
It's true.
But I think let's bring it back for a second, because I think one of the things I want to make sure, so there's tons of people listening and they're like, what the hell are you guys talking about? And that doesn't bother me. But I do think it's like, if we're making this, I think this episode is much more around like personal self-development, like, your career, these things. Like, why do you feel like, I think the example that you gave of like, man, like this problem is one that I've like never had before, but it still like brings you discomfort, right? Like, do you think that there's like, as you kind of evolve your business and you become this like successful keynote speaker and you do all this stuff, like, what do you think? I mean, I could imagine that sitting in discomfort is incredibly useful for being a keynote speaker. It's something that I'm literally like behind the stage, like with my arms in the air, trying to be as big as possible and like psych myself out and like, be like kind of the opposite of who I am. Like, what do you think is your bits of advice in that? Like, are there any tips or tricks that you use for keynote speaking? Are there things that you use like in business about sitting in discomfort? Like, I know negotiating contracts, right? Like, it's something that we deal with all the time. And I hate money. Like, I hate those discussions. Like, I was literally just talking to my therapist about this. She was like, once you get free of this money thing you have, like, it'll be so relieving. And I was like, great. But yeah, like give some wisdom if people are listening.
I mean, I can also say like, it's interesting. Speaking to people isn't something that I find uncomfortable, and especially speaking in like a keynote setting. What I found though, and we spoke about this, whereas like, okay, there's me on stage. How does that translate to a social platform? How does that translate to a LinkedIn, to a IG, and so so my Substack, I wrote a whole,
I know, I'm still waiting.
Two of them in the clip. And perfectionism keeps making me think, oh, do I need to add a subscription thing here? Do I need to add this here? And how do I get from being somebody who's starting at something in a novel space to somebody who's like, because I guess there's that expectation of me because of the work that I do here. But then I'm like, wait, I want to start something here. And where is that discomfort, right? And so part of that is I have built systems of accountability of people who they're empowered to tell me stop being it's done. Like to get so part of it for me is there's systems of constraint that I have to put upon myself to like get myself out of the thinking that I'm in. And especially when I think specifically about speaking, about things like that, like repetition, like sitting within repetition is something that is part of my practice. And so I was listening to a podcast on YouTube. This guy was talking about like the notion of effortlessness and effort. And he's like, effortlessness is not the lack of effort. It is that you have done the thing so many times that the display of effort's not there, but the display of effort is baked into the thing. And you're not necessarily distracting from the thing. And so in my mind, like whether I'm building the system so I can get through and like not stop myself, or is that I'm just like, I've done the thing enough times that I have a new muscle for it. So even I'm going to be at Paradigms again in September, and I actually owe them. They're like, hey, what's your title and your description of your talk? And
us too.
Right?
We're all a little bit delayed. Sorry.
Yeah. And so I'm currently in a space where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a whole new talk. No, like I'm not recycling anything. But in that, what is it that I really feel compelled to talk about? And can I talk about something new in a compelling way that is at the same level as what I usually talk about? And so in that, that's a really good challenge for me. And so right now I'm like, my assistant's like, hey, like it's due. Are you done? And I'm like, no, because I'm still tweaking this. I'm still doing research about this. But in that, now I realize I just need to get out of my own way and just ship and know that I have at least from now till September to continue
Yeah.
noodling on the thing.
Yeah. I mean, so all I'm taking away from this is Nu is just like all of the rest of us. And like you're still figuring it out and we're all just making it through. And it's not like some things come easy. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, like, you know, the newsletter's so easy for you. And it's like, I don't know. Like I'm like, no, it's not easy, but
No.
but it is a muscle. And I am like,
Mm.
it's a muscle that I have used many, many, many times. And now I don't want to die every single time it leaves, you know, the inbox, you know?
Man.
So it looks effortless. It looks effortless.
Did you get to the point? Because yeah, hitting send on a newsletter. Oh my God.
It's
wow.
really,
How?
it keeps you up at night.
How did you get to the point that it wasn't?
My therapist. How many times are we going to bring up my therapist? Shout out to Laurel.
Yeah, Laurel, we really
Laurel works
appreciate
hard
you.
for Laurel works really hard for me. She just told me that nobody cares and no one's paying attention to you, and that was like really relieving. And it was like, why don't you do it for 6 weeks? And if you don't like it anymore, don't do it anymore. And for me, that was enough. Like, so I'm the, like, it sounds like you're an overthinker, maybe in a different way. But for me, like the overthinking is much more around like, you know, my ego and like moving past that. And I was like, okay, like just put that aside. That doesn't exist. There's not like no one cares. And it was freeing. And then you know, yeah, I barely slept the first time, maybe slept a little bit better the second time. And then, you know, after 2.5 years of doing it, like it's like, well, like, you know, sometimes it's the bet. Like last week, I was like, yeah, this newsletter, like it was just flowing. Like I was like, words were coming out. And then other weeks it's not like that. And I don't analyze it as much anymore because it's like, well, it's just 1 week. Like, you know, come back next week and try again.
It's interesting for me because publishing a journal. So our ambitions when we started with Dean was it to be a biannual publication, and we've moved to triannual, meaning we will try to get an issue out annually. We're not holding ourselves to that to that anymore. But what's like super interesting is like that being a physical thing, like it's full. My team is like full of angst, and the people who I work with, the designers, the writers, and my job in this instance is to be like, hey, y'all, out of the 50,000 letters and words we have in this thing, there's going to be typos. And that's okay. But still holding that space, even as a person who's like, I need to hit send on this newsletter. Like then when we're like, sending to the printer. And so there's been moments like in issues where it comes back and I'm like, look at that. And then I have to be like, am I going to tell this person this specific thing? Because I know they're going to beat themselves up over this thing. And I don't need them in their heads about this. And what I usually try to do is like, what's a system that we can put in place that will allow for us to remedy this? And so I think the biggest system that I have is our name, Room for Magic. Room for Magic is really an inside joke to myself to be like, relax, bro. Like you don't need to figure it all out. Like leave some room for things to just like develop how they need to develop.
I love that. I
think that's the perfect note to end on. So we got to go through a quickfire though. Kirsten is the quickfire queen, so she's going to take it through.
All right. Nu, you ready? Get hydrated.
Yes.
3 things every brand should do.
Invest in junior talent and empower junior talent. Understand that AI is not going to replace talented people. It will allow talented people to pick and choose how they can do their work much better. And every brand should not conflate a brand for community, because brands and communities and customers and audiences aren't the same thing.
Love.
What's the trend that has you the most excited?
The trend that has me the most excited, but also the most concerned, is related to public knowledge that now is sitting within brand spaces. So whether it's Miu Miu doing their literary club, me thinking about me working at Red Bull, like there's a lot of salons and talks that are happening that are holding like very essential public knowledge that usually would be in academia, that usually would be within certain institutions. So that excites me that brands are understanding now that influence in the way how we communicate things deserves a certain level of sophistication. The scary part is that brands have no requirement to maintain that. And so then that knowledge isn't public, that knowledge ends up being private, and it can go away when it should live and be shared as a resource for everyone.
Yep.
Love that.
What's one thing that most brands get wrong and who gets it right?
That intimacy can't scale. Brands think that intimacy can scale and they try to scale it, whether it's via social, whether it's via newsletter, whether via we brought some influencers in and they're like, intimacy can't scale. The people who I've seen who have done it the most successful, there's a certain level of sophistication of understanding that we don't need more people in the room. AKA, this event doesn't need 1,000 people. Like what it really needs is 150 people so that people can actually connect much more deeper and go deeper and not just juice the numbers, right? Like it's not about like juicing the numbers. And so a brand that I think has done it well, I would have to say Red Bull Music Academy specifically. And Red Bull Music Academy was a 20-year endeavor where they had Red Bull just gave a blank check to an agency, Yada Star, and that agency, well, the brand was in response to the agency. So meaning if you wanted to do something with Red Bull Music Academy, like you needed to ask the Yada Star team, and there were a bunch of German dudes who would just say no to everything you said because they were the stewards of it. And so what was cool was that it wasn't the biggest thing ever. And they would take over a city and do a month worth long of programming and have this application. If you're an upcoming musician, you would fill it out and they would choose 6 people. It's kind of like Willy Wonka golden ticket. And then you get to hang out with like your idols. But that was cool because that allowed for moments of intimacy between the participants, but then these bigger moments where they had public events that came around that. It's no longer happening anymore.
Yeah.
Well,
a beautiful
and maybe
example.
that tells you. Yeah.
This was
Nu,
amazing.
Thank you for
Awesome.
taking us on this
Thank y'all.
very windy, only Nu could do journey.
Beautiful journey. Beautiful
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
I'm excited
Thank
to
you
hang in
for-
LA
Yeah.
next time Kirsten's in town, please.
Yeah. And
I'll
in
make it
Croatia. And come and hang
Yes.
and everyone else come and hang out with us in Croatia. I think there might be a few Paradigm tickets still left. And
Yeah.
yeah, we're excited. That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.